this is Jason McCann with Mountain Tactical Company. In our last episode of the anatomy of the Tikka T3, we discussed what came in the box. We unboxed a rifle, showed you how to put it together, and talked about the instruction manual, some tools that come with some rifles and not others, and we actually had a little blooper where our rifle was missing a magazine and how to deal with that situation. We're going to go into a deep dive into the heart of the Tikka T3x, which is the bolt. The Tikka T3x is a bolt-action rifle. Now, if you're a gun geek like me, there is a fantastic book by Stuart Otteson that was republished by Fred Zeglin of 4D Chamber Rentals. So you can go and pick up a copy yourself. It has some engineering diagrams of some groundbreaking bolt-action rifles over the years. But in the introduction, he actually defines what a bolt-action rifle is. So I figured we'd go over that so we're on the same page. One is tempted to conclude that it is the lockup where rotation engages locking projections of the bolt and the receiver. Yet many other action types have also utilized the turning bolt. Examples include the gas-operated Grand M1, a straight-pull Canadian Ross, and the lever-action Model 88 Winchester. What defines the bolt action is the unique combination of the turning of the bolt and an integral operating handle, which allows the direct application of pressure in proportion to the situation. Thus, not only is great power available, but it is under complete control of the shooter. So all that to say is, bolt-action rifles are manually operated through the rotation of a bolt. So how does all this apply to the Tikka T3x? Well, let's take a look here. So we have a clear safe firearm. I'm going to remove the chamber flag. You would manually slide the bolt forward by the handle. You would rotate it down. The rifle is now in battery. Pull the trigger. The rifle fires. You manually rotate the bolt up. Take the rifle out of battery. And while you open the bolt, the round's ejected. And each bolt-action rifle has a little different mechanism to make that happen. But we're going to dive into the Tikka T3x, take this bolt apart, and show you how it operates. So the first thing we need to do, after making sure your firearm is clear and safe, is to remove the bolt from the rifle. So on the opposite side of the rifle is the ejection port. Obviously there's right-handed and left-handed models where that's going to determine where the round's ejected from. You have the bolt release button. So you press here, the bolt stop releases, and you can remove the bolt out of your rifle. Now let's zoom in a little closer and dissect this thing. Unlike most two-lug bolt-action rifles, the Tikka does not have a 90-degree bolt throw. It is only 70 degrees, which makes it faster to operate than, let's say, the traditional Remington 700's 90-degree bolt throw. When the locking lugs rotate 70 degrees, you can see how they engage the interior lug abutments of the action and lock the bolt safely into battery. So on a bolt-action rifle, the bolt is where all the magic happens. So there is a lot going on in this small part of the entire rifle system. So starting in the rear, you have your cocking indicator. Every rifle has some sort of indicator showing if the firing pin is back, locked and cocked and in battery, or if the firing pin has moved forward because the rifle has been fired. So on a Tikka, you have a red dot showing that this firing pin is loaded in the cocked position and ready to fire. When you fire, that red dot is going to go inside this bolt shroud and will not be visible. So there's an old saying, red is dead. That means that the rifle is in a condition that can cause harm. Moving forward, you have your bolt shroud or dust cover. And with the dust cover or bolt shroud, this serves a few different functions. This keeps dust from accumulating inside the bolt and keeping that clean. If dust gets inside the bolt, it can cause problems with the firing pin moving forward. There would be additional friction in there, and you would get light primer strikes. Needless to say, it's a bad day when your gun won't go off when you want it to go off. Additionally, what the bolt shroud does is if you do have a ruptured case in the chamber and you have all those escaping gases are going to flow up the bolt. The bolt shroud is going to capture them and keep those from going into your face. A pretty handy thing to have. On the original Tikka T3, this was a plastic piece, and I can say from personal experience that the plastic one will crack and fly off your rifle if you have a ruptured case. With the T3X line, this has been upgraded to a metal injection molded bolt shroud. It's heavier, but it is significantly stronger than the original plastic T3 bolt shroud. If we rotate the bolt over, this is your cocking piece. The cocking piece actually loads the firing pin spring and engages with the trigger sear and holds that pressure in a safe location until you actually pull the trigger. And we'll take this bolt apart and get a closer look of this. Rotating it a little further, most European rifles, and it could be all European rifles, I don't know, all European rifles that I have seen have some sort of bolt locking component. So when the safety is on, the bolt is locked shut. It won't accidentally open up on you. Personally, I greatly appreciate this feature in a hunting rifle. Rotating a little further, we have our bolt handle, and you'll see as we take the bolt apart, the bolt handle on a Tikka is actually pretty ingenious because it is used as a cam to hold the entire firing pin assembly together inside the bolt. We then have our bolt body. Moving forward, we have the bolt nose, and on a Tikka T3X you have a tapered bolt nose instead of a square bolt nose. It's going to make it go down the bolt raceway more smoothly, and if there's any debris in your raceway, it's going to be able to push that out of the way without actually pushing it into the chamber. Tikkas all utilize a Sako style extractor, and we'll take this apart and get a closer look at it. And then this is a 300 Win Mag, so you have a Magnum bolt face. And the bolt face is this little recess right here where the cartridge actually is held into position by the bolt. So in the bolt face we have a small firing pin hole, which is fantastic because some companies that have a looser tolerance around their firing pin hole, you'll actually get primer flow back into that firing pin hole. And if you're doing hand loads or precision shooting, that can definitely cause problems and increase the likelihood of a ruptured case. Alright, so now let's start the disassembly process. So the first step of disassembling your Tikka T3X bolt is you need to rotate the cocking piece out of the holding notch to remove the bolt shroud. Now it's very important that you rotate this away from the cocking cam notch. If you rotate this into the cocking cam notch, you are going to unload all that spring pressure on your firing pin spring, and you're going to have a bad day trying to get it out of there. We have a tool that'll help you, but again, you're going to have a bad day if you don't have that tool. So the cocking cam notch is this deep gullet over here. The holding notch is the little notch that the cocking piece sits in. So we're going to rotate this away from the cocking cam notch, out of the holding notch, and you can do this by hand, but we actually make a little handy tool that slides over the bolt shroud and makes it a little easier to rotate it away. And you'll notice as soon as you get to the end, the cocking piece actually stops rotating and the bolt shroud actually springs free. Inside the bolt shroud, you'll see there is a tapered spring. We can remove that just by taking a pin or a screwdriver. And the narrow end of this spring rests on the back of your firing pin, and the large diameter end of the spring rests on the back of the bolt shroud. So we're going to go ahead and set our bolt shroud to the side, our spring to the side, and we're going to take a closer look at our bolt. So without the bolt shroud, we have a better view of the cocking cam notch and the holding notch. So when your rifle is in battery inside the action and your cocking piece is being held back by the trigger sear, it is hovering over this cocking cam notch. And when you pull the trigger, this is what allows the firing pin to move forward. And then when you open the bolt, the cocking piece slides up this ramp here. And when the bolt's fully open, it goes into the holding notch. And so it seems very simple, but all of this has to be timed like a watch. So that is one of the things that differentiates a budget rifle versus a high-end rifle, is the feel. Can you feel all this being done smoothly, or is it kind of clunky? So for us to remove the firing pin, we're going to take our exact same firing pin tool, our Tikka bolt tool, and what we want to do is we do not want to unload this pressure. So this gap right here is a 6mm gap. If this is allowed to move forward, you're going to unload the firing pin spring pressure, and it's going to be very difficult to load it back up and put it back in the bolt unless you have something filling that gap. So we're going to take our tool, and you'll see there's a forked end. We just slide it in there. That happens to be 6mm thick. We can then rotate our cocking piece in the opposite direction. It's going to fall into the holding notch. We're also then going to rotate it over the cocking cam notch. And you can see that is now loose in here. But we can easily, because we have the tool on there, reload that firing pin spring. So we're holding our gap here. Now we relieve pressure from our bolt handle, and our bolt handle will simply slide out. And we can disassemble this entire system. So let's take a dive into the components that make up the firing pin. Alright, so let's clear the deck a little bit and focus just on the bolt internals. So the cocking piece, the critical components on here is the cocking cam, which is this rounded surface. That's what actually allows the mainspring to reload while you open your bolt. And you have a sear notch here. This is the flat of the sear notch. And the sear is part of the trigger, and that is what actually holds everything suspended until you pull the trigger. Tikka uses a floating cam here to hold the bolt handle in place. The bolt handle actually holds this entire assembly inside the bolt. It's a pretty simple design and very simple to disassemble and to maintain. You have your main firing pin spring here. This retains the firing pin spring. We won't be taking this apart because it's all under spring pressure, and there is a little spring clip under here that is quite a pain if you lose it or damage it. But that's what holds this dry fire stop in place, holds the main spring at location on the firing pin. Moving forward, we have the actual firing pin that all of this is riding on. And then you can see the heat treatment and tempering marks on the front of the firing pin where we actually strike the primer. You'll notice that this is a tapered firing pin, which increases the strength, and it is slightly rounded at the end, which also increases strength and increases the longevity of the firing pin mechanism. All right, let's talk about the bolt nose. So I said, this is the bolt face. This is what actually interacts with the cartridge. And then we have a Socko style extractor, which is kind of neat. It's kind of like a little miniature Mauser style extractor that's just more compact, highly reliable. I mean, these things are bomb proof. I've never had a failure to extract on a Tikka T3 or a Socko. Here you have your spring plunger ejector. Now the way this works is this is a very, very small, stiff spring. So when you close your bolt, the case is under spring pressure. That's pushing on the case. So when you open the bolt, bring it out of battery, the case wants to spring and kind of flick out because the rim's being held here. This is trying to kick it that direction. And so as soon as you hit that ejection port on the action, the case just flies out. So we have a tapered bolt nose. So if there is any debris in the raceway, that is pushed out of the way and is still silky smooth. Additionally, a Tikka T3x is a push feed bolt system. So that means it pushes the round. It is not a controlled round feed system where it actually grabs the round and has control over it. We'll do another video going into the weeds on different bolt action types and anatomies, but for now, Tikka T3x, very reliable push feed system. So all this is going to do is push the round out of the magazine into the chamber. As soon as everything goes into battery, the extractor clips over the rim of the cartridge and the ejector plunger holds that spring pressure until you open the bolt and that springs out. All right, to better illustrate how the bolt interacts with the action, I just pulled a bare action out here. So we have a little more compact area. We can get a little closer view of everything. But in any bolt action rifle that uses a Mauser style bolt, which has a larger diameter locking lug than the bolt body, there is some sort of raceway inside the action that the lugs follow. So you can see that here. When we insert the bolt, it follows along that raceway, and that captures the movement of the bolt. So it can only move back and forth. You can't get out of alignment. It's barely a little bit of room to wiggle in here. But that is what allows the bolt to travel forward and backwards inside the action. I hope everyone enjoyed the deep dive into the Tikka T3x bolt and all its components. If you like this sort of content, subscribe because we're going to have many episodes to come. In the next episode, we're going to deep dive into the stock. We're going to talk about the construction, how it's made, the different components, and what makes each stock in the Tikka T3x lineup a little different from the other ones. So until the next episode, go get some trigger time.